All right, let's dive deep into a piece of literary history today. We're going to trace the evolution of female freedom, but we're doing it through two absolutely groundbreaking Indian novels. Now, these books were written 50 years apart, but they both asked a really radical question for their time, and they did it through the lives of two women you won't soon forget. So, here's the question at the heart of both these stories. What does it actually mean for a wife to leave her home? Now, that might sound kind of straightforward to us today, right? But you have to understand, in 19th and early 20th century India, this was a social earthquake. We're talking about an act that challenged the very foundations of family, of tradition, of everything people thought they knew about a woman's place in the world. Okay, section 1, two novels, two wives, a 50-year journey in literature and society. So let's meet our two heroines, shall we? We're looking at these two really important novels, published half a century apart. And in each one, there's a wife who dares to cross this sacred line. But, and this is the key, they do it for completely different reasons, and they're living in completely different worlds. So look at this gap, 50 years, that's a huge amount of time. And between 1864 and 1916, India was just completely transformed. You've got massive social reform movements, you've got this rising tide of nationalist feeling, and this incredible half-century of change, it is perfectly reflected in the journeys of our two wives. Okay, so let's break them down. On one side, you've got Matangini from 1864. She's spirited, she's rebellious, but her actions, they're really a reaction to her awful, abusive husband. She acts because she has to save other people. Then you fast forward 50 years to Bimala. Her situation is totally different. She's not trapped at all. In fact, her husband is this liberal guy who actively encourages her to be free. So her journey isn't about saving someone else, it's about finding herself. I mean, when you put them side by side like this, the difference is just staggering. All right, next up, crossing the threshold. This is where we look at two women leaving the safety of home, but for very different reasons. Let's really dig into that pivotal moment in both novels. You know, the moment when the heroine actually leaves her home. Because how they do it, and maybe more importantly, why they do it, well, that tells us everything we need to know about how the very idea of a woman's power was changing.
So first up is Matangini's escape, and honestly, it reads like a gothic domestic thriller. It's intense. She finds out her abusive husband is plotting a serious crime. So what does she do? She makes this incredibly desperate, super courageous escape in the middle of the night to warn the person he's targeting. Her leaving home isn't a choice she ponders. It's a physical act of rebellion against a clear and present danger.
And just listen to this, the deep darkness of the night, the howl of the winds. But she did not stop. Wow, that just perfectly captures her incredible force of will, doesn't it? The author's using all these elements of Gothic horror, the storm, the darkness, and it's not just to show she's upset, no, it's to hammer home how unbelievably brave she is. She is literally, physically breaking out of her prison. Okay, now let's completely flip the script and look at Bimala. Her story is a psychological drama. She doesn't break out, she's invited out. I mean, can you believe the difference? Her husband is modern, he's Western educated, and he thinks it's ridiculous for her to be locked away. So her journey isn't a physical escape at all, it's a psychological one. She's stepping out into a world of big ideas, of politics, and yeah, of temptation. So section 3, the home versus the world. What exactly lies beyond the walls of the inner sanctum? This brings us to a really crucial idea, the huge difference between the home and the world in these books. And to really get why leaving was such a big deal, we have to first understand what home even meant back then. So in 19th century Bengal, they had a word for this, the antapur. It means the inner sanctum. And you have to get this. It wasn't just a physical place. It was a woman's entire universe. It was her domain of safety, of respectability. To willingly step outside of that, that was basically social suicide. You're risking everything, your reputation, your social standing, your entire identity. And this really shows the massive difference in the world each woman steps into. For Matangini, her world is a physical space, full of physical threats. We're talking a dark, stormy night, real dangers. It's all about external threats. But for Bimala, her world is an ideological space. It's a bright, seductive place full of political ideas. The danger for her isn't some guy chasing her through the woods. It's internal. It's the temptation of radical ideas and a very, very charismatic leader. And here's where Bimala's story gets even bigger. It's not just a domestic drama. Nope. It's actually an allegory for India itself. Think about it.
Bimala, the wife, she basically represents Bengal, or India, torn between two powerful ideologies. Her husband, Nikhilesh, he stands for modern values, for a constructive, thoughtful way forward. And then there's Sandeep, the revolutionary. He represents this aggressive, seductive, and honestly pretty dangerous brand of nationalism. This quote from her husband, Nikhilesh, is really the moral heart of the whole book. He says, "I am willing to serve my country, but my worship I reserve for right, which is far greater than my country." What he's saying here is so powerful. He's arguing that patriotism can't just be a blank check for doing immoral things. He's warning against a kind of nationalism that puts country above basic truth and humanity. And this is the incredibly complex battle of ideas that Bimala finds herself smack in the middle of.
All right, Section 4, a question of agency, from reacting to circumstances to making choices. So what does all of this tell us about a woman's power to act, her agency? How did that ability to make her own choices actually evolve over these 50 years?
Well, it evolved dramatically. I mean, really, truly dramatically. If you look at Montangini, her agency is reactive. She's a hero, for sure, absolutely. But she's acting in response to a crime that's happening. Bimala's agency, on the other hand, is proactive. She makes choices, and yes, some of them are really bad choices, not to save someone else, but to figure out who she is. She has what you might call the modern freedom, the freedom to be wrong.
So in just 50 years, that's it. The main struggle for the literary heroine in India went from a quest for basic survival to a quest for self, from just staying alive to figuring out who you are. That is a monumental leap, and it shows you just how much society itself was changing.
Okay, our final section, the price of freedom, the consequences of rebellion and self-discovery. Because let's be real, freedom always comes with a price tag, right? So what happened to these two women who dared to step outside the lines? What were the consequences? You know, when you lay it all out like this, the evolution of the wife in these novels is just so clear. Look at motivation. It goes from self-sacrifice, leaving home to save others, to self-discovery, leaving home to find herself. The husband, he goes from being a straight-up villain to a partner and a guide. And the world outside, it transforms from this dangerous physical place to a complex ideological one. And the big one, agency, it goes from just reacting to what's happening to actually making choices, even if they're bad ones. So what's the consequence for Montangini? Well, for her, the price is incredibly high. Her society, back in 1864, it could imagine a woman rebelling, but it couldn't yet imagine rewarding her for it. So even though she is, by all accounts, the hero of the story, her life ends tragically. She's basically forced into a quiet life of penance, forever branded by the fact that she dared to step out. Now, Bimala's journey is also destructive, don't get me wrong. Her choices lead to real chaos, real violence. But her consequence is so profoundly modern. Her story doesn't end with social punishment. It ends with a painful but deep self-awareness. She's humbled, for sure, but she has finally learned who she is. And that self-knowledge, as tough as it was to get, that is the ultimate prize of her freedom. So there you have it. This 50-year journey through two books maps this huge shift from a world that demanded a woman sacrifice herself to one that started to value a woman discovering herself. It's a huge change, and it leaves us with a pretty big question to think about, doesn't it? As these definitions of freedom keep changing, how do we define what it means for a woman to be free today?